Hi, this video goes out to my right wing evangelical friends. In my previous videos, I have been talking about my personal confrontation with impending death due to cancer. Today, I want to talk to you about another kind of death close to my heart, the death of democracy, and how so many have forsaken their faith in the name of politics. There are a couple of stereotypes about evangelical Christians in the U.S. that tend to ring very true. One, the vast majority of evangelical Christians are right-wing Republicans, with many on the extreme. Second, they tend to be very patriotic. As much as I could tell, the primary reason so many evangelicals are right-wing Republicans boils down to two primary issues. The first is the desire of evangelicals for Christianity to be the religion of the land, and as such, to be accepted by and promoted by the federal government. The second issue is their strong belief in the right to life, i.e., the belief that abortion is fundamentally wrong. At issue to me, though, is how these two beliefs have caused them to abandon the very principles in which both their religion and their country were founded. Man has a long history of using God as an excuse for committing devilish acts. Politicians and others will frequently cherry-pick passages out of the Bible to justify their actions, while completely ignoring other passages in opposition. However, we are facing a real crisis in our country today. One that threatens both the principles that have made our country great and the fundamentals of the Christian religion. It is time that the so-called evangelical Christians to ask themselves, is promoting their two main causes mentioned above worth going against the teachings of Jesus and the principles that led to the founding of our country and that helped make this country great? Let's talk about abortion first. Right-to-lifers would have you believe that abortion is against God's will. Yet, there is no direct evidence or reference to abortions in the Bible. Supporters of this view use Exodus 21:22 as evidence. This verse states in the King James Version, "If men strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall surely be punished according to the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine." This passage appears to be saying that if a person attacks a pregnant woman and thus causes her to give premature birth, then the attacker should be punished both for the violence on the woman and on the prematurely born child. But the punishment is up to the husband, not to society. Yet even the most ardent supporters of abortion would agree with the statement in general, because they view birth of a child to be the woman's right, not the right of the person forcing the action. Now, let's take a look at the Republican Party, and especially their leader, Donald Trump. Trump, in so many ways, can be seen as the anti-Jesus. Mind you, I'm not saying the Antichrist is prophesied, but the anti-Jesus in that his actions, not his words, are time and time again in direct opposition to the teachings of Jesus. And sadly, the Republican Party as a whole has been taking on more and more of these characteristics. Start with how Trump got where he is today. Trump started his empire with a hefty inheritance. Of course, the Bible says the meek shall inherit the earth. Trump is the polar opposite of meek. I think he believes meek is what coats are made from, as in, I gave Melania a meek coat for Christmas. Trump does not intend to inherit the earth, but to buy it. He then took his inheritance and built it into an empire by consistently preying upon small contractors. He would hire them have them do the work, did not pay them what he owed. His attitude was that his lawyers were better than theirs. And because he hires small contractors, they cannot afford the legal costs and the years in court to successfully sue Trump. Not that they haven't tried. Trump has literally been sued hundreds of times. Look it up. So what would Jesus think? Trump glibly talks about bringing back Christmas as though it ever left. Yet this is the same person who actually banned Christmas trees in one of his buildings. According to the Washington Post, this occurred in 1981 after Trump had purchased an old apartment building across from Central Park in New York City. He wanted to tear it down and build a gleaming new high-rent tower. But first, he had to get rid of the current tenants. Thus began a 3-year war to make living there as miserable as possible, including the edict to ban Christmas trees. What would Jesus think? Trump has openly lied to the American public. No, this is certainly not new to him, politics, but the sheer volume and audacity of his lies are. According to a nonpartisan group, Trump has already publicly lied over 1,700 times since taking office. This started from the very beginning, when he required his press secretary to issue a statement saying that his inauguration had the most people attending, period, even though there were pictures and easily verifiable evidence to the contrary, including views of empty stands clearly visible in the background during the parade. These alternative facts have been repeated over and over again in different forums with different agendas. Trump doesn't just lie to advance his agenda, as is the case with most politicians, though. He often lies just to make himself look better. What would Jesus think? Throughout the Bible, it is made clear that Jesus prefers the meek to the wealthy. For example, Luke 18:25. For it is easier for a camel to go through a needle's eye than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. And James chapter 5 seems particularly aimed at Trump. Go to now, ye rich man, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in the pleasure on earth, and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts, as in the day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. Even the most ardent Trump supporter will admit to his massive ego. Yet it is written in the Bible, in Matthew 6:24, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. It is without question that Trump's master is himself. Everything he does for his personal benefit. Every policy he makes and has implemented since becoming president either benefits him directly or feeds into his hate and intolerance of the poor, the disenfranchised, the minorities, those of other faiths. In short, anyone that does not fit into his circle of rich, entitled white males. What would Jesus think? There is no doubt that the latest tax cut plan put forth by the president and passed by Congress primarily benefits the wealthy and corporations. Is this what Jesus would have done? Does Jesus not want us to care for the meek and the poor? Yet the tax plan not only directly benefits the wealthy, it greatly hurts the poor. By decreasing the incentive for people to give to charities, the poor, as well as the arts and culture, will suffer greatly. Moreover, as the plan adds tremendously to our national debt, by the way, in opposition to traditional Republican values, it not only passes on a great burden to our children, who are favored by Jesus, but will no doubt cause Republicans to call for massive cuts to entitled programs that largely favor, you guessed it, the poor, the meek, the ones that cannot care for themselves. What would Jesus think? Trump has stated many times he will not profit from the tax cuts. Indeed, his family would be hurt. But nothing could be further from the truth. The tax cuts alone will save him millions. But there are amendments that directly affect Trump. These include giving pass-through corporations, such as Subchapter S, a huge tax cut, instead of having them taxed as intended when they were created, to be taxed at the individual's rate. Trump's businesses are all Subchapter S. But wait, there's more. Also added in was a special provision that provides special relief for real estate developers, like Trump. There is even a provision that directly benefits golf course owners. Why were these two businesses uniquely singled out? Because they benefit Trump. What would Jesus think? Trickle-down economics has never worked. And we have a fantastic example of Trump's economic policies put into action. Just look at the state of Kansas, my home state, where Trump lights and future present Trump appointees Sam Brownback and Chris Kobach implemented tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy, stating it would lure more companies to the state and keep current companies from leaving, and that the economic benefit would trickle down. These policies decimated the state, nearly bankrupting it. Public education was left in shambles, as were entitlement programs. It got so bad that the Republican state legislator had to reverse these tax cuts. So don't buy into the rhetoric that these cuts were for the middle class. They were clearly meant for the benefactor class. What would Jesus think? It is one of the commandments to not covet thy neighbor's wife. Yet Trump has been married 4 times, each time dumping his old wife in favor of a newer, younger model. He has been accused by at least 16 people of sexual harassment. Moreover, he openly mocks the disabled, see his famous response to the disabled reporter, and those he deems unattractive or fat. What would Jesus think? In the Gospel of Matthew, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you." It's from the English Standard Version, Matthew 5:38.42. Who do you think Jesus is referring to when he talks about the one who's slapping you, that is suing you, that is forcing you to go a mile? Does it sound like somebody you know? Maybe someone you elected? As we know, Trump does not take criticism well. He immediately lashes out at those he perceives as attacking him, often belittling them in public while maneuvering behind the scenes to punish them. And he is the one who is always doing the suing. His charity, like his university and other schemes, was a total sham. What would Jesus think? In the Sermon on the Plains, Jesus says, "But I say to you who hear, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you. And from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them." Luke 6:27-31. Well, it's true, Trump does appear to love Vladimir Putin. But Putin is the enemy of the United States, not Trump. No, Trump admires Putin and is obviously grateful for his help in getting him elected. However, he does consider North Korea to be the enemy of the U.S. and its leader specifically to be his enemy. How does he treat them? Does his insults of their leader seem like love? Is his constant threatening of nuclear annihilation and war and dismissal of talks sound like something Jesus would approve? Trump's golden rule does not come from the Sermon on the Plains, and now referred to as "do unto others as you would have them do unto you." Trump's golden rule is the one of wealth, as in he who has the gold rules. His demand of uncompromising loyalty is in direct contrast to the teachings of Jesus, who embraced Judas. What would Jesus think? Trump is vehemently anti-immigration. Not only does this conflict with the teaching of Jesus, it directly contradicts one of the guiding principles that made this country great. The United States is a country of immigrants, with the sole exception of the Native Americans, who this country mistreated since the beginning. Every American citizen can trace their roots to an immigrant, some of whom were forced here. It is this diversity that makes us strong. It's what generates new ideas and stronger bonds. This is not a weakness. It is a strength. Trump, by all indications, is also a racist. He is a strong admirer of Breitbart News, the voice of the alt-right, an organization with strong ties to white supremacy movement, and a regular publisher of white supremacist propaganda. One of his closest advisors, Steve Miller, has direct connections to the white supremacist movement, as does his former chief strategist, Steve Bannon. And his comments after Charlottesville leaves little doubt, as does his comments about Mexicans and his treatment of the disaster in Puerto Rico. Racism, by its very nature, goes against the teachings of Jesus. If you were a patriot, you should also be extremely concerned about Trump's treatment of the Constitution and his seeming fascination and admiration of totalitarian rulers such as Putin, Xi Jinping, Rodrigo Duterte, and even Saddam Hussein. His words and speeches are full of their praise. Yet he criticizes and mocks the leaders of our closest allies, such as England and Germany. Yet he has never criticized the leader of our sworn enemy, Russia. He is a strong proponent of the Second Amendment, but seems to have completely forgotten the one that came before it, the one that calls for freedom of speech. There is no doubt he believes he has the right to free speech. It's just that he doesn't think any of his critics do. He openly mocks the media, except for those that are openly and aggressively right-wing, such as Fox and Friends and Breitbart. He has even called for the punishment of newspapers that have dared speak against them, and called various free media the enemy of the people. He has threatened to pull the license of a major network and wondered why reporters could report anything with impunity. He has been everything but subtle in his attacks on free press and of his contempt for it. Yet, the free press and the freedom of speech are literally one of the founding principles of this country. What would Jefferson think? He has little regard for our country's history, as his constant misrepresentations of it clearly indicate. He even has little regard for those who preceded him in office, minimizing their accomplishments, especially those of our country's only black president, and constantly bragging on his own. He has numerous times made statements saying things like, "No president has accomplished more than I have." He has even stated after visiting a disaster site in Puerto Rico that he doubted any other president would have done as much. During his brief visit, by the way, Trump only visited the wealthy suburbs of San Juan, which were not as devastated as the rest of the island. What would Jefferson think? His entire presidency seems bent on only one goal: to undo everything his immediate predecessor did. Anything Obama was for, Trump is against. And we all know that Trump was a leading advocate of the birther movement that claimed that Obama was not eligible to be president. And yet, he has also claimed Obama was a Muslim. Why does Trump, who was once a Democrat, have so much hatred for Obama? See above. Trump is very much a racist, and Obama was black, with a name that sounds Muslim. Trump and his minions, Scott Pruitt, are dismantling the EPA. They ignore all scientific evidence of climate change and refuse to believe American industry is a culprit. As a result, we are the only country in the world to not abide by the Paris Accord. The EPA is continuously eliminating rules restricting air and water pollution and refusing to enforce others. The Clean Air Act is not being enforced. I doubt God would approve of Trump's actions that are destroying his creation. I know our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren that will inherit our massive debt and our polluted skies and waters will not appreciate these actions. And what about Trump's campaign against Muslims and the demand by the religious right for more involvement in government? Have we forgotten why America was settled by Europeans in the first place? It was specifically because they were seeking freedom of religion. Their faiths were being suppressed, and they sought a place where they can worship as they see fit. Freedom of religion is a founding principle of this land. It is guaranteed by the Constitution. Yet, this president is fighting a war to suppress it. Freedom to worship for him only applies to faiths he approves. What would Jefferson think? There is a reason why the Constitution clearly states that there be separation of church and state. When it is otherwise, not only is the freedom of religion almost always suppressed, but God is often used as an excuse to wage holy war on others. What would Jesus think? What would Jefferson think? If you are truly a Christian, then you should believe in all of Jesus' teachings, not just cherry-pick the ones that benefit you or fit into your notion of the world. And if you are a patriot, then you should appreciate what made this country great in the first place. Not only are we a race of immigrants, but we were founded by those seeking freedom of religion. Freedom of religion, like freedom of the press, is one of the core principles of our country, as in the words found in our Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. Being a racist is not being patriotic. Campaigning for a Christian democracy is not consistent with our founding principles of religious freedom and separation of church and state. Don't be like Trump. Don't be a hypocrite.